Okay, so we may revisit the mining of an asteroid case a little bit, and now we have a good confidence interval, right? So for example, in this case, we have a bunch of probabilities, and if I just take a single probability again, and not 0 but 1, okay, so the probability I compute is 1.23%, and again, if I use a single sample, the variation or the standard error is huge. But now, since I know I'm using about 10,000 samples, well, my standard error or sigma is actually pretty small, right? Compared to my p, it's going to be about 0.1%. All right. Now, if I want a 2 sigma confidence interval, I would have 2 minus 2 sigma and 2 plus p plus 2, sorry, p equal to this, and p plus 2 sigma as my confidence interval. I would have a p, the true probability being between 1.01% and 1.45%. And that's consistent with the many repeated sampling procedures we have performed. All right, so this is our discussion on the Monte Carlo method. Any questions before we move to the next portion of our data analysis and stochastic portion of 6090? No? All right. Okay, so the last thing we want to discuss in this lecture is the so-called design of experiments. It's very related to the Monte Carlo methods we discussed, but there is a key difference in the objective. The similarity lies in that it's a sampling-based procedure. So it takes samples of variables and computes the results. But the key difference is the purpose. The purpose is not necessarily computing the probability of something happening or characterizing the mean and standard deviation of a certain outcome quantity of interest. But the outcome, the purpose of design of experiments is trying to figure out how does the input affect the output, right? It's not just figuring out how the output would vary, but figuring out how the output would vary for given inputs. Usually for design of experiments, the inputs can be categorized into 2 categories. One input is the we call the random factors. It is basically the kind of random inputs we have in Monte Carlo methods, right? Something you have no control with. But there are also a second type of factors called control factors. These are the inputs that we can control. And the key difference of design of experiments, also called the DOE, the key difference between DOE and Monte Carlo method is the existence of these control factors. And because we can control these factors, we not only want to know how does the output vary randomly, but we also want to know how does the output vary as we change the control factors. Okay, so for example, one of the key consideration, one of the key application of design of experiments is actually in design optimization, right? For example, if you want to design an airplane, and yes, there are a bunch of random factors, but the more important thing is the factors you can control when you start the design process. Like, what's the span of my wing, right? How much does the airplane weigh, etc., etc. I mean, a lot of control factors goes into the study, and the output of the study might be, okay, what is the range of the airplane, right? How much payload it is going to carry, right? Is it going to exceed? It's going to be satisfying the criterion of the design. So these are the outputs, and it's not very interesting to figure out how does the output vary randomly, but it is important to figure out how does the output vary as I change the control factors. So this design of the experiment is often seen as a pre-stage for a rigorous optimization procedure, which we are going to discuss in our next lecture. So we start with this design of experiments, and then we zoom into the most interesting or promising region of the control space, of the design space, and perform an optimization. Right. So the DOE is want to figure out how outputs depend on the inputs. All right.